Hey there, everybody. Christopher Moonlight here, and today we're going to be talking about the movies Dune. Yes, movies, plural. I'm going to be breaking down the relationship between Dune overall and how it has influenced and left a major footprint on cinema. We're going to be covering Jodorowsky's unfilmed version. We're going to be talking a little bit about the novel as well. We're also going to talk about David Lynch's Dune and why the two different directors have something in common that suits the novel very well, and why they actually were pretty good choices at the time to translate this book into a movie. I'm also going to be speculating a little bit about Denis Villeneuve's, I'm sure I'm saying that last name wrong, new version of Dune, how it is influenced by the former two directors, and also how it's going to relate to other content creators as we move forward in this post-COVID television series movie-making environment, as well as how both directors' filmmaking philosophy have worked their way unintentionally into the creation of my own film, The Quantum Terror. So if you're not familiar with my channel, a lot of what I discuss here is content creation. And when I say content creation, I mean all things that are consumed entertainment, specifically through the internet and video on demand, because in my past video, which is one of my most popular videos, Hollywood is Dead and Movies as We Make Them Are No More, don't worry, it's not as bad as it sounds. It's actually a positive video, so check it out, please. I discuss in that how in a post-COVID world where everybody has been forced to stay at home and discover video on demand in ways that they otherwise wouldn't have because they didn't have the time, or they were kind of more set in their movie-going ways. That's going to change not only how everybody consumes media, but also how it's going to change storytelling overall, the way we tell stories, and there's a lot of opportunity for things that have never been tried before. I think we're going to see a lot of new, exciting stuff. So I'm going to relate that all together in this video. So let's get started. Okay, so why does the novel Dune attract such spiritual, surrealistic directors such as Jodorowsky and David Lynch? In order to explain that, I'm going to have to talk a lot of spoilers. So if you haven't read the novel yet, go check it out, come back to this video. The book deals with very similar themes to Star Wars on the surface because Dune influenced George Lucas. It's about a young boy who has to come of age, become a man, become a warrior, and overthrow an empire, essentially. The difference is that in Star Wars, Lucas takes a very adventure approach, and in Dune, it gets very serious and very dark. Where Luke Skywalker is very clearly a good guy, Paul Atreides becomes a monster. He has to do absolutely horrific things, what would be judged war crimes in our society, to overthrow the emperor. The story is very complicated, and Lucas acknowledges this influence, and he pays homage to it when he mentions things like the spice mines of Kessel, spice runners. That is a direct nod to Dune. But the story of Paul Atreides deals with different factions, kind of feudal lords in the universe in the form of dukes and barons. There's an emperor who they all kind of obey, but they're all conspiring against each other. There's the Pilots Guild, these strange unknown beings who are humans that were transformed into prescient future-seeing. In David Lynch's Dune, they're shown to be these very strange kind of Lynchian mutant creatures in water tanks. But essentially, they take the spice melange, which is mined on the planet of Dune, to fold space, see into the future, and it's given them a lot of power. So they hold a lot of control over what goes on in the universe, because without them, no one can travel through space. They don't use computers anymore. There's a whole backstory that's kind of like Terminator to that, or maybe The Matrix, where humanity was almost wiped out by their robot servants, and therefore robots have been made illegal, computers have been made illegal. So now, through the use of spice and discipline and training, we have what are called mentats, who are like human computers. So there's a lot of, humanity is evolved in very strange ways in Dune. But the Pilots Guild see into the future, and they see that this Duke's son, Duke Leto Atreides' son, Paul Atreides, is going to be a problem for them, and they want him killed. So the Emperor and the Pilots Guild and the Harkonnens, which are an enemy of the Duke and his faction, all conspire to kill them. And they do that by making them a very, essentially an offer that they can't refuse. The Emperor puts Leto Atreides in charge of Dune, where the spice is manufactured. He who controls the spice controls the universe. So if you're in, the Harkonnens are out and the Duke is in, and they move in from this very water plentiful planet to a planet where there are no rain clouds, there's no moisture. Water is essentially as valuable as gold. On this planet are the Fremen, and the Fremen have a prophecy that one day an outsider will come and he will become their messiah, the Kwisatz Haderach, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. It may be Paul Atreides. Now, here's the interesting thing about the prophecy. The prophecy revolves around the spice, around all this ability to be prescient and see through space and time and make predictions and become these, like, superhuman, essentially what Nietzsche, and if you're not familiar with the philosopher Nietzsche, Google him. Essentially an Übermensch, which is Nietzsche's way of saying Superman. So just to dive into that very quickly, Nietzsche's philosophy saw that the Western civilization was kind of letting go of the idea of God. He famously said, God is dead. He wasn't saying it in a celebratory way. He was saying it with a little bit of lament, the idea that humanity thus far had looked towards a Christ figure, and the Christ figure was both the judge and the redeemer. Essentially, the person you judge yourself against, and if and try to aspire to be a better person, and if you do well enough, then you can be redeemed. Nietzsche saw that without that, humanity would start to lose focus. They would start to not try and improve themselves. So he said, well, we need an Übermensch. We need some sort of replacement for Jesus, where there's a perfect being that we can judge ourselves against and improve. Now, this was perverted by people like Hitler, who thought they were actually going to become a superior race, which was not what Nietzsche intended at all. I know some people talk about that. It's sort of like that all over again in Dune. The idea of this Kwisatz Haderach, this prophecy of this, Messiah that would cause a crusade across the universe, that would purge the universe of the corruption. It was a manufactured prophecy. None of it has any actual basis aside from what another order of people, what I kind of refer to as space nuns, called the Bene Gesserit. They also consume the spice. They also are prescient and have psychic abilities and are very disciplined. They have manufactured this prophecy in order to control the population of the universe. The problem is that the prophecy that they created got altered a little bit when the Duke's wife, who is also a Bene Gesserit, decided to have a son instead of a daughter, which could be the Kwisatz Haderach, against the wishes of the Bene Gesserit. So their plans kind of got kicked into high gear. So it gets out of their control. And anyway, so Paul ends up on this planet. He becomes the Kwisatz Haderach by taking the spice melange and fulfilling the prophecy. This is where people like Jodorowsky and Dune are perfect for it, because it does something that you never see happen in Star Wars. In Star Wars, You see Luke Skywalker train to use the Force. He's moving objects with his mind. He's wielding the lightsaber. But there's really not much except for what's said between him, Yoda, and Obi-Wan Kenobi in terms of spirituality, in terms of being transformed by a religious experience. In Dune, there is a lot of that. There's a lot of going inside Paul's head, a lot of the philosophies that shape him into the man he is and evolve him into the Kwisatz Haderach. I think that David Lynch, in his version, did an excellent job of kind of creating these psychedelic visions of what happens when a Bene Gesserit drinks the water of life. That's another thing in the book. I didn't mention that the water of life comes from an aspect of the spice. I'm not going to spoil everything. It becomes a very spiritual journey. And again, it's not spiritual in the sense of enlightenment in a way where you become this kind of, holy being that is benevolent. It's almost like he becomes this, essentially like a dictator. I mean, he's having the skins of his enemies turned into the skins of his war drums. Going to Denis Villeneuve's Dune, it's going to be very interesting to see how he approaches that. How do you approach that in a mainstream way without turning off your audience? That wasn't even touched upon in David Lynch's version. Now, with Jodorowsky's Dune, the one that never came to be, people don't realize what a huge footprint on cinema Jodorowsky left, and especially his unshot version of Dune. Essentially, Dune was what the writer Dan O'Bannon, who created Alien, was involved with before Alien. He had done his film Dark Star, and then he came on to Dune with Jodorowsky. Jodorowsky also wanted to cast Salvador Dali, I believe, as the Duke, but I could be wrong about that. He brought in H.R. Giger. He brought in Mobius, the comic book illustrator, and he called them all his spiritual warriors. Now, to kind of give you a little more context for that, Jodorowsky has a very unorthodox way of making film. He's comes from the art school mentality. He is surrealist. He is symbolic. His first film, I can't remember the name of it, was like this weird gunslinger, surrealist gunslinger in the desert story that might have been something that related to Dune. And then he did a very famous movie called Holy Mountain. Now, my opinion of Holy Mountain and how it ties into content creation is it was very experimental. It was very unconventional. It was kind of all the chances being taken to create something that nobody had ever seen before, which in this day and age, with video on demand being as it is, I find extremely exciting. I think that there should be more experimental filmmaking. What I don't like about it is that, and this is my opinion, I'm not speaking for Jodorowsky or David Lynch, because I'm going to bring David Lynch into this in a moment. I found Holy Mountain to be wholly unwatchable and holier than thou. I think Jodorowsky is coming from a place of bitterness. He has a little bit, if not a huge, narcissistic superiority complex. Opinion statement. From my point of view, it's a movie where he presents himself as this high priest who's going to take these people on a journey and remove them from the materialistic world, their vanity, their warmongering, and he's going to purify them on the holy mountain, show them the way. Through all these surrealist visions, and they did, I mean, this is not a small budget movie. There's tons of people in it, tons of weird stuff, sets built, all sorts of strange things going on, which can be interesting to watch in bits. I find it almost impossible to watch the movie entirely the way through. But it becomes very self-righteous. But it is, his idea of spirituality. I find it kind of cultish. Again, he's the big spiritual guru. He's the center of it all. And a lot of people, even John Lennon, thought it was an amazing film. A lot of people said they came out of the movie changed. To me, I find that there is a a little bit of a trick being done, an insincere trick in Holy Mountain. And that is, he takes things that are obvious things to anybody of average or a little higher intelligence, but may seem like revelations to younger people who haven't had enough experience to figure these things out on their own yet. So he takes these obvious things and he pronounces them in a way that makes it seem like he's making transcendent statements. And then he mixes them in with his own personal ideology. And it's fine to have your own personal ideology. My only problem with any ideology is that you should always be open to new information and not be so steadfast that you become stubborn and stagnate. But he takes his own ideology and mixes it in with these obvious things and then makes it seem like he has made some sort of huge spiritual revelation and put it to film. I find it a bit disingenuous, but I do appreciate what he's done as a filmmaker, being experimental and trying all these different things, applying symbolism in ways that hadn't been tried yet on film. Again, some of it, to me, some people think it's really bonkers and what the hell's going on. I actually find it a bit on the nose, but maybe that's because I have studied filmmaking, symbolism, psychology. To me, and maybe this is coming from a place where I've grown up in an environment where before this stuff had never been tried, it just doesn't appeal to me. David Lynch, on the other hand, he has a very similar approach. His movie Eraserhead, which was also very weird and very symbolic, and he says it's his most spiritual film, I absolutely love. It's strange, it's terrifying, but what I like about it, as opposed to Jodorowsky's vision, is that he's very honest about himself. He doesn't present himself as some guru with revelations that he's going to use to change the world. And actually, Jodorowsky actually said with his version of Dune, it was going to be, he had these artists, they were his spiritual warriors, and this movie was going to change consciousness, which is really like, boy, you think a lot of yourself, don't you? Forgive me. I'm judging him based on, the information I have. But, when you say stuff like that, I don't think David Lynch ever thought he was going to change the world with his movies. He does hold transcendental meditation in high regard, and he believes that is key to changing the world. But then again, transcendental meditation is a personal thing, and he'll be the first to acknowledge it. Again, what I like about David Lynch's stuff is he's very honest about himself. He doesn't see himself as this, high guru. At least he doesn't appear to me. It's almost as if his movies are confessions. He sees the dark side of himself and he puts that in the film, rather than seeing the dark side as something external that he's going to kind of wag his finger at in his movies. So I appreciate that. But I do see why Jodorowsky would be attracted to Dune and the spiritual aspect of the book and showing Paul Atreides' kind of journey through metaphysical time and space to become this super being that would lead a crusade across the universe. In the subsequent books, he does do that, and he's a terrifying figure. He's not a hero that you'd want to hang out with. I mean, his wife is murdering people that are on his side that are, questioning him. There's even in the second book a moment where his second in command says something to him like, "Hey, are you blind to this obvious thing?" And it says in the book, he got away with that, but if anyone else had said that, they would have been murdered on the spot. And then the books get really weird from there with his son and his daughter, and his son becomes this kind of immortal, half human, half sandworm. And are they going to do that in future films? So let me bring this back home to content creation and why I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with this movie. It's going to be interesting to see people respond to it, if they're going to go check out the book, if they're going to look into Jodorowsky, if they're going to look into David Lynch's version, which is not a perfect version. David Lynch disavowed himself from the movie. He didn't get final cut, and he never felt like the movie was what he wanted it to be. I believe he even went so far to say he sold out and he regrets it. Jodorowsky went on record recently saying that the trailer for the new movie looks nice, but it looks predictable, and obviously it's not the way he was going to do it. I kind of agree with that. I'm not being completely anti-Jodorowsky, by the way. Jodorowsky has some good points. Yes, I believe the trailer was predictable in the sense that it almost looks like David Lynch's Dune. As a matter of fact, I've been seeing people do recuts with David Lynch's footage shot for shot. I think that might be Denis Villeneuve's, I know I'm saying that wrong, being respectful to what happened before. You notice that Pink Floyd is playing in the trailer. Jodorowsky wanted Pink Floyd to do the soundtrack to his version of Dune. So we'll see where he's going, but there's a lot of strange things going on in the book that aren't specifically commercial. People have already had Star Wars, so a lot of them may be expecting something more like Star Wars. Are they going to get it with this film, or are they going to get the strangeness of the novel? So bringing this all back home to us as content creators, what is the takeaway from this? Well, one of the things that interests me is that the new Dune movie is going to be split into 2 parts. Now, this is nothing new. They split The Hobbit into 3 parts, and that was a disaster. But there's enough material in Dune to definitely create 2 movies. As a matter of fact, Dune as a series of novels might actually be better as a series like Game of Thrones or The Mandalorian or Stranger Things, something like that. This is still Hollywood leaning towards what I've been saying is happening all along. The way we tell stories is evolving. I don't know if this movie can be successful enough to warrant sequels in a post-COVID world. But what I really would like you all to do is check out Dune, check out the novels, check out the David Lynch version. I believe there's a documentary on Jodorowsky's Dune, although I haven't seen it. There's also a sci-fi original series that I never checked out, but I'm going to. It just looked really low budget, and I don't know if it was any good or not. I didn't hear very good things about it, but we'll see. What does all of this have to do with us as content creators in an evolving market where every aspect of storytelling is changing in ways that we can't predict? Well, we have to evolve with it. I can only relate it to my own experience with my film, The Quantum Terror. And if you have been following my channel for any amount of time, you'll know that The Quantum Terror is a movie that I have been working on for the last 5 years. Originally, I thought it was going to take 2, but being my first feature film and being done on a super low budget, me wanting it to be of a high quality anyway, a lot of extra time and what my friend Alec Gillis calls sweat equity had to be put into it, and combine that with the fact that everybody has to make a living, so I had to take different jobs that would postpone post-production. It's taken a lot longer than I want it to, but in that amount of time, something what I can only describe as transcendent has happened. What was in the original script evolved when I shot it, and it evolved as time went on, and I learned new techniques, new ways of making better special effects. And it also evolved how I looked at writing, how I saw myself. You can do a lot of growing in 5 years. You can become almost a completely different person, which I believe I have. The Quantum Terror evolved from just being a Lovecraftian / surrealist Alice in Wonderland horror movie to more of what I would call a, dare I say it, transcendental, metaphysical film. I would almost call it a symbolic confession of who I was back then to what I've grown in now, where I've gone wrong, and where I see myself growing as a person. So that has manifested itself in a new edit. I'm working on new special effects right now in this setting. I actually have stuff all around me set up where I'm shooting some new visual effects. Was this because of Dune? Was this because of David Lynch and Jodorowsky? Yes and no. I'll start with the no first. No, in that I didn't look at their work and say, oh, I really want to make something like they did and try and copy it. Yes, in I can now relate to the spiritual journey, for better or worse, that those two directors have gone in. Whether I agree with them or not, I understand what it means to look within and without, try and make sense of what's around you, and also try and be humbled by it in a way that you can be honest with yourself. You can be honest where you've gone wrong. You can be honest with who you are deep down inside, touching that dark side, coming to terms with it, and wanting to grow into a better person. Now, like I said, with Jodorowsky, I feel like his wanting to grow into a better person kind of manifested in trying to tell others how to be a better person. But, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe all the people in his movies represent him and what he sees as bad within himself. I think that probably more likely holds true with David Lynch. But I tried to take these lessons and apply them to my work. But even if I didn't kind of look at them as just surface level lessons, these things kind of happen naturally anyway if you let them. And I think that's a very important thing to keep in mind when creating your content in this new era of whether you're making films, whether you're making YouTube videos, whether you're making a series, short films, whatever it may be. We have had over 100 years of Hollywood movies. They've changed over time. There's been, trends. There's been great shifts in styles. The technology has changed. But we have seen the hero's journey put on film many times, to the point where we feel like it's the only way to tell stories. The original Hero with 1,000 Faces, it's not a book about writing stories. It's a book deconstructing archetypes, and essentially like a market watch book, except instead of watching a market, it's watching trends in storytelling and reoccurring themes. It is a very important book to know. It's also important to know Jungian psychology, because Jung was the father of archetypes, and a lot of the vocabulary we use is also from Carl Jung. These things tie into Dune. These things tie into Jodorowsky and David Lynch. I will be very interested to see if they tie into the new version of Dune. And if so, how are they going to approach it? Are they going to do something that we've never seen before? Or is it going to be predictable, like Jodorowsky said? I kind of hope Jodorowsky is wrong on this one. I see why Hollywood needs to go with the conventional, safe stuff. I think Hollywood's going to have to learn to evolve because they're no longer the top dog. Like I said in my other videos, it's gone global. It's been democratized. People like you and me in our garages with green screens and consumer products like our cell phones or Blackmagic pocket cinema cameras can tell stories on low budgets, and the budget isn't an obstacle anymore. It never was. It never was. Everybody can tell something interesting. Everyone can make a piece of art that amazes people. You see it on the internet all the time. I mean, the internet has shown us that. How many times have you seen some amazing piece of artwork and, the process behind it, in time lapse or something like that, and it turns out, it's just paper mache, or they did it out of cardboard, or they did it out of, nuts and bolts. Whatever it was, they created something that people were attracted to, and they did something that came uniquely from them. So that's what I really am trying to say here, and the lesson from Jodorowsky and David Lynch and Dune in general, this amazing book that has left its mark on cinema and storytelling. Go within. I know that sounds cliche and stupid, but go within. Find your voice. Find your unique way of telling stories. Take advantage of the fact that the constraints of cinema and television have been lifted through video on demand and content creation. It is an exciting time to be a creator, but do not limit yourself to what came before. Be experimental. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to make a fool out of yourself, to say stupid things, to try something that everyone looks at and laughs at. Because at first, people usually laugh at things that are new. I mean, when the Beatles released Rubber Soul, a lot of people didn't like it at first. They were kind of like, this is weird. We haven't heard anything like this before. But as time went on, it became like the bar that was set. And then that bar got broken by Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And from there, music changed in ways that nobody ever imagined. That could be you, that does that unique things, that changes things. Hollywood is afraid to take that chance until somebody else does it, and then they want to copy it again and again and again. That's just the way things are. Now's the time, man. Honestly, you know, even the movies that we think of now as like the big blockbusters, these were auteur directors taking chances. Jaws was, you know, way over budget, doomed to fail. Star Wars only cost $11 million to make, which even back in the 70s was not a huge budget. Aliens was an $18 million movie, which if you adjust for inflation now, I think comes to something like $36 million. These are not $250 million movies. The original Terminator, I think, was an $8 million budget. And they were using film. They were using, you know, the proper studio methods. Now we have all of this stuff in our garage. I think I've said enough. I think you get it. Thanks for watching. This was an incredibly difficult video to make and have this conversation and say these things. Dune is a hard thing to talk about because it is so nuanced, and there's so many different facets to Jodorowsky and David Lynch and Denis Villeneuve. Saying that wrong. I know I am. But thank you for listening, and if you enjoyed this video, I think you'll enjoy my other videos where I talk about different aspects of this stuff, everything from market watch to writing. I have interviews with special effects artists, actors, filmmakers, comic book creators, all on this channel, and there is more coming soon. So please be sure to like this video, share it, leave a comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell for notifications, all the usual stuff. I do have a Patreon. The more information coming soon about my movie, The Quantum Terror. And if you're interested in independent films and how they're made, I have a book that I've written. I'll leave a link in the description below. It's the making of the movie Harbinger Down, which was created by Alec Gillis and Tom Woodruff Jr. of Studio ADI. They are responsible for a lot of amazing special effects that you've seen in movies like Aliens, Tremors, Starship Troopers, The Santa Claus, Spider-Man. The list goes on. They've got a great YouTube channel as well. But their movie Harbinger Down stars Lance Henriksen and Camille Balsamo. It is available on Amazon Prime, iTunes, and Tubi. I love Tubi. It's a strange little app that I've discovered. It's got a lot of great old school content that you have a lot of fun with. But if you want to see how they made that movie on a low budget, all the wonderful things that they did to get that made, my book, The Making of Harbinger Down, is available on Amazon, Kindle, and print on demand. So thanks for watching, and I will be back with more stuff. Let's keep this conversation going, and let's keep creating new, great, innovative content that nobody's ever seen before.